Hi guys, this is Vidisha Vitlani and I am an IELTS trainer working for the Aussies group. Today in this seminar, I'll be covering up the writing component, and specifically in the writing component, I'll be covering up two things. One is the basic overview and second is the band descriptors. Band descriptors are basically very important because that actually shows how you're assessed, how you're judged by the examiner. Writing is technically a subjective module, so it's very important to know what is required to what is required in your essay or your graph. I'll be taking you through a presentation, and at the end of the presentation, I'll be taking down questions from your end. The IELTS writing task for academic and general is divided into two tasks. The total time duration you get for this is around 60 minutes. Okay, there are two tasks here, task 1 and task 2 as I mentioned. Task 1 for the academic module is a graph. Basically, you will have a pie chart, a table or a line graph, and you have to describe it in 150 words. That is the minimum word limit. You have 20 minutes to complete this task and you will be having 3 bands for this. For the general is going to be a letter. Letter can be formal, can be semi-formal or can be informal. Again, the same criteria is there. There are 20 minutes for this, there are 3 bands and there are 150 words. Okay, coming to the task 2. Task 2 would be given 40 minutes. Now this task is particularly very common for both the academic and the general module. It's an essay that you have to write. You have to write this essay in around 250 words and you have 40 minutes to write the essay and 6 bands would be for this one. Okay, this is the writing band descriptors. Now moving on to the band descriptors. Band descriptors are basically very essential because it is very important to know that what you need to do in case you want an 8, you want a 7, you want a 6, and what are the errors that you should be avoiding. This particular table is for the task 1. Okay, task 1, I'll be just going through the main points of it. I'll be explaining task 2 in detail since we have a webinar scheduled on the 29th specifically for task 1 general and on the 6th for task 1 graph academic. Right, so basically the criteria is more or less the same, so it would be very easy when you actually write your task 1 or task 2. There are 4 criteria. The first is task achievement, the second is coherence and cohesiveness, the third is lexical resource, and the fourth is the grammatical range and accuracy. Okay, this is for your task 1. There is no minimum word. The word limit is minimum, that is 150 words. There's no upper limit, but it is generally advisable not to stretch it too long because ultimately you would go out of the focus, you would make more errors. So I would suggest definitely do not go way too overboard. Okay, now these are the 4 band descriptors for your task 2, which we are going to see in detail. The first one is task response. The second one is cohesion and coherence. The third one is lexical resource, and the fourth one is the grammatical range and accuracy. Moving on to the first one. What do you mean by task response? Task response is basically a phenomenon. Task response is basically a criteria of how well you respond to your task, right? It's the way you answer. But there is a specific way to answer this for specific points. Now see, if you look at band 7 and if you look at band 8, there is this first point which says addresses all part of the task, sufficiently addresses all part of the task. This technically means that you answer the question fully. If it's a double question, you answer both the questions. If it's an agree or disagree, you state your opinion. If you see the second point in band 7, presents a clear position throughout the response. That means your idea should have a lot of clarity. It should not be unclear, it should not be unorganized, it should not confuse the examiner, right? Also, you need to present, extend, and elaborate the main idea. Now, this is something that I always keep on telling my students. What you generally do is Let's say there are 4 reasons to it. You just present one, reason number 2, reason number 3, reason number 4. Please do not do that. You present the main idea and you explain it. You present the supporting idea and also elaborate it sufficiently. Also give an example to it. That is how you're going to make your argument strong. That is how you're going to make the core of your essay very, very strong. And if your position is clear, if you're actually writing a essay on, let's give an example, whether a government should ban the use of four-wheelers. So let's say you're actually supporting it, yes, because it causes pollution or it causes traffic. So please explain it properly. Do not leave anything to the discretion of the examiner. If you see band for a band 6, when can you get a band 6? The second point, it says that it may be unclear or it may be repetitive or the ideas may be inadequately developed. So please be very careful of this. So when I come across students, what I see is they always get very good bands when it comes to like listening or reading, and in fact speaking too. But when it comes to the writing component, they always drop down. So this is because most of the times the task response element is they're very low on it because the idea is presented vaguely, they're not very clear, they're not elaborating it properly, they're not giving an example to support it, they're not presenting it well ultimately, or sometimes what happens is they even fail to understand the meaning of the question. So please avoid this kind of an error. Also, if you go to see a band 5, the first thing that you really need to avoid is address the task partially and the incomplete, inappropriate format. So please address the task fully. If it's a double question, ensure that you're answering both the question. If a suggestion is asked, if the measures are asked, make sure you give what is required. So there's this one rule in IELTS that I always keep propagating. That is, please answer what is asked. Be it the speaking module, be it the writing module, even in listening and reading, it's quite relevant. So do not go out of focus. Just answer what is asked, and you're just through with this one. Okay. This was all about task response. This is the first criteria. Okay. All the 4 criteria hold equal weightage. Like there is task response, there is coherence and cohesion, there is lexical resource, and there is grammatical range and accuracy. All of this 4 has proper weightage. So you'll be marked out of 9 for task response, out of 9 for coherence and cohesion, for lexical resource and grammatical range and accuracy. The average would be taken and you would be scored out of it. Okay, moving on to the next bit is coherence and cohesion. This is very easily said and as difficult if you don't understand the logic of it. Lot of essays when I see, I feel that they're always lacking somewhere or the other when it comes to coherence or when it comes to cohesion. Why coherence and cohesion is important? Firstly, what is coherence? Coherence simply means that you are sequencing the information, that you're logically organizing it. The organization bit in any essay is extremely crucial. One point should come after the other only, and the main idea should come first, the supporting idea should come later, the example after that. So basically maintaining the format is very, very important. uh, Cohesion means you use linking words to actually link your ideas, to sequence your ideas. Okay, now coming to band 7, if you see the second point, uses a range of cohesive devices appropriately, although maybe there may be some under or overuse. Now, what I mean by this is we know a lot of cohesive devices. We know a lot of words that have been repetitively used, but like for example there's furthermore, there's moreover, there is firstly, secondly. Now when we know these words, what happens is we keep on using them, we keep on using them as fillers, sometimes we keep on using them to increase the word count. Please do not overview these words. I understand that you've mugged up these words and somewhere down the line you want to put them into use, but please just put them in use whenever it's important. Also, let's go for the first point of band 7. It logically organizes all the information and ideas, and there is clear progression throughout. The first bit that I said, I'm reaffirming it. Please logically organize your idea. Imagine I'm starting this presentation and I'm just starting with the band descriptors without actually even telling you what this is about. It doesn't make sense, right? I had to start with an overview and then take you to the brand descriptors. The same logic applies here. Okay. So if anything is not sequenced properly, it's not going to make sense. However nice, however good your content is, the organization bit plays a very, very important role. Okay, now how do you organize this? How do you make sure that your essay is sequenced? You make sure with the help of cohesive devices. Okay, the basic format that I follow for my students is the introduction. Obviously, the introduction starts with the general statement and then you go for your thesis statement. Then comes the main body paragraph where you're actually supporting the idea, where you're actually developing the core of your essay, where you present the main idea as in the task response, and then you elaborate it. Then you present an additional idea, then you present an example, and then you conclude your essay. So this is how the entire sequence of the essays goes. If it's a double question, like for example, what are the problems and what are the solutions to it? What I would suggest is first go with the introduction, answer the first question first, answer the second question second, and then give an overall conclusion. Your conclusion is more or less basically you reaffirming what you've said above. Like, do not make sure that your introduction and conclusion are more or less the same thing. Okay, let's go to the band 8 last point. There is this one point that actually says that use paragraphing sufficiently and appropriately. Now, this basically means your essay should not be without paragraphs. Sometimes we have a habit of writing for our universities or for office or for professional purpose in the bullet format. Please do not do that. Your essay should be in the paragraph format. Also, what I suggest my students to do is go for like 4 to 5 paragraphs, properly organized. Do not make too many paragraphs. There are people like, let's say you have 4 points, so do not make like 1 point, 1 point. Do not create a long list of paragraphs. Another, it doesn't create a very good impression. So go with the standard 4 to 5 paragraphs, depending on your idea, depending on your question, depending on how well you want to, how well can you get the synchronization of it. There is one tip that actually makes it very easy to logically organize your essay. Let's say you have 40 minutes for writing the essay. Spend around 10 minutes before just to understand the question and creating a basic layout. If your basic layout, a rough draft of your essay is ready, then when you write your final essay into 50 words, it's going to be very, very simple. Now, what happens when you actually do your layout, you do your brainstorming before writing is, first of all, your task response is appropriate because you know what the question is. You've spent time in reading the question. You've spent time in understanding the question, dividing the question, and deciding on what to answer. And the second thing, when you create a layout, you're actually planning it. You're actually creating a flow chart of it. So when the final draft, when the final essay is ready, it is much, much better. Okay, let's go to the band 6. Let's read the second point there, that what is something like, why are you always stuck with a band 6? You know, I come with a lot of queries that have given the IELTS once, have given the IELTS twice, and then they're like, we can't get above 6. And then what are you supposed to do? So I would rather suggest avoid this thing. See, use cohesive devices effectively, but the cohesion within or between the sentence may be faulty or mechanical. Now, cohesion is basically the linking words that you use, and what you do is when we mug it up, when we're actually learning it up, when we have this template format that we all go for a shortcut. So that times it becomes mechanical, that times it becomes faulty. Sometimes I've seen a lot of essays in which for the contradiction bit, there is furthermore given. When you're contradicting it, you have to use an appropriate word for it. Also, using the wrong word at the wrong place doesn't, it would definitely give you a negative impression. Let's go for band 5. Maybe repetitive because of lack of referencing and substitution. So please do not repeat your ideas, do not repeat your words. Also, when you make inadequate or inaccurate or overuse of cohesive devices, each sentence does not need to have a cohesive device. There have been students who've been doing that. After every full stop, they want to add some cohesive devices. but each sentence will not need a cohesive device. Each idea would, or each paragraph would. So once you're done with the main idea, you're presenting a supportive idea, add one. Once you're adding a secondary idea, add one. So that basically coherence is very simple if you understand it. But a lot of people tend to miss out on marks on something like this. Like if you see essays, there would be least marked on coherence and cohesion. Okay, in the next slide, I'm going to take you through a list of cohesive devices. You can make a note of them if you want. Okay, I'll just explain you for what, which ones are used for what. Okay, let's go for the sequencing bit. So when you present, when you start the main idea, you start it with firstly. When you go for the second idea, you go for secondly, thirdly, next. Avoid next, it's kind of a little informal. Okay, when you want to add another idea, moreover, furthermore, in addition to add on. The next is when you're actually giving an illustration. When you're giving an illustration, when you provide an example, you go for example, for instance, illustrated by. Okay. When you're comparing two ideas, let's say you're comparing two cities or you're comparing two students in an example, you go for similarly, you go for likewise, you go for like, you go for equally, you go for in the same way, right? Um, when you're qualifying an idea like this is this, like pollution is there, but there are measures to it. So you go for but, you go for however, you go for although, unless, except. The last is for contrast. When you're developing the third idea, you can go for whereas, alternatively, on one hand, conversely, nevertheless, however. Okay, these are a lot of list of cohesive devices, and you can pick any which you're comfortable with. I generally suggest students to pick up few and keep them on hand so that you know how to use them in sentences. And when you're going for your actual IELTS exam, you do not mess up. You're very confident, and you use only those which you're confident in framing of sentences so that you're not grammatically incorrect also. All right. One more thing I would like to specify. There is a lot of list of cohesive devices. Please ensure you do not target, I want to use them all and fill your essay with it. You're not supposed to do that. I'm sorry, I'm repeating things over and over again, but this is because of the mistakes that we've seen. And ultimately, this is an hindrance for 7 to 8 bands. So this is not something that I would definitely want. Right. Now, the next bit is the lexical resource. Often it's misinterpreted by a lot of people, and a lot of people believe that you need good hi-fi words or good fancy words to score an 8 for lexical resource. No, it's not like that. First of all, let us understand what lexical resource is. Lexical resource is nothing but when you use the correct word at the correct place. Lexical resource is nothing but when you have a wide range of vocabulary with you. And technically uncommon words, like you're actually not repeating your words and you have few words that are a little uncommon, not extreme. Okay, let's see what a band 7 for lexical resource requires. It uses vocabulary, resource flexibility to discuss a variety of topics. Now, let's say in the first paragraph, I want to mention this word called beneficial. And my first word is beneficial. So when I come to the second word, it's got to be advantageous. When I come to the third word, it's going to be a good thing. The fourth thing, I may rephrase it, I may paraphrase it as something like essential, or maybe I would conclude it with a better word called boon. For example, the same thing for important. There's important, there's pivotal, there's essential, there's crucial, right? Also, so make sure that each paragraph has a different word, even though as simple as maybe we can be using these words in day-to-day life. Do not, there's absolutely not me. Like one day the student runs up to me and he's like, ma'am, I heard that we need to have at least 40 words for a good lexical resource, and 40 words which have to be extreme big. No, it's absolutely not that. First of all, you will not be able to even use them. For example, using the correct word at the correct time is very important. I'll give you. There's this word called hesitate. Okay, hesitate is a verb. So to hesitate is a verb. Hesitation is a noun. I can say that there should not be any hesitation. It cannot be replaced by to hesitate. Whereas there are some words which are extremely difficult, and most of the times we are unaware whether it's a noun form or whether it's a word form or it's a verb form or it's an adjective, and we just tend to use them because it sounds good or it looks good. Don't do that. Use a word which you know the meaning of, which you know the word form of, you know what it is. It's a noun, it's a verb, or it's an adjective, and make sure that you use it where it's needed. Right. Okay, let's go to the second point. Uses some less common and idiomatic vocabulary and shows some awareness about style and collocation with some inappropriate choices. Now, what are collocations like? We all know what words are. Now, let's understand what collocations are. Collocations are nothing but set of two words which are used together. When a set of two words are used together, it's called a collocation. Now, this may be an adjective plus a noun. This can be an adverb plus a verb. So that becomes a collocation. So collocations are very, very simple. So when you're actually learning few words for your vocabulary, I would definitely suggest you to do this one thing. Please learn few collocations also. Please go through some collocations, because when you go through collocations and you use them, it plays a very, very good impact. Okay, now let's read the third point. Use your paraphrase very, very effectively. Now, what do you mean by a paraphrasing? To paraphrase something means you rephrase something. So most of the times what kids do, what students do is they pick up the question, they write the question, they copy down the question. Do not do that. Use different words to write down the question. Use as you rephrase it as possibly as possible, and does not generally mean the active passive voice. So what I ask my students to do with in terms of paraphrasing is understand what the question is about and write it in your own words. If you were to write this question, how would you write it? Rephrase it that way. So it's a simple process. You can practice paraphrasing very often because you start your essay with it and you generally want it to be very good. And paraphrasing also is a part of your thesis statement, so it has to be very, very strong. And when you have a lot of vocabulary, this helps. Okay, let's go to band 6. When you get a band 6, why are you stuck up on a band 6? Okay, has a wide enough vocabulary to discuss topics at length to make the meaning clear. So even for band 6, your vocab has to be you need to have clarity in your essay in spite of inappropriacies. Now this inappropriacies is exactly what I was telling you about, using the wrong word at the right place. So if you're supposed to use a noun and you're supposed to use a verb, this is where you're going to score band 6. There are few ways to improve the vocabulary. I'll just give you a quick tip on that. The first thing that you do is you come up with 2-3 words with every essay. Let's say you're done with your essay, your examiner's checked it, you're practicing it. Go through it, fill in. What can you substitute? Have you used important more than once? Okay, substitute it with essential. Have you used good more than once? Substitute it with some other word. So this is what I advise my students to do. Always, when you're actually preparing for the IELTS test, give yourself just 3 words a day. Give yourself just 3 words a day. Understand the meaning of it and make sentences out of it. Try to imagine where you're going to use it in your day-to-day life. So basically, when you go for the IELTS test, I'll tell you, you're all nervous, you're writing, this is the 3rd module, so sometimes you're really exhausted, and then when you start writing, it's very difficult for the right vocab to click. It's very difficult for the right word to click. So when you use vocabs in your day-to-day life, at that point of time, this is not going to be a problem. Like, for example, you use affable instead of friendly. As a person, she's very affable. So when you're using affable instead of friendly in your exam, it just clicks because you have a habit of using it. So please just go as minimum as possible. Go for like 3 words a day, 1 month before the exam, and you will have like plenty of vocabulary with you. And you will exactly know how to use them also because you've been speaking it or you've been writing it. If you go to see the band 8 last point also states that The person uses paraphrase effectively as required. So paraphrasing plays a very, very important role when it comes to the actual IELTS examination. Moving on. Okay, coming to grammatical range and accuracy. A lot of essays and we have a lot of comments. The grammar is wrong. There is lack of grammatical range. There is lack of accuracy. If you see for a band 6 and for a band 7 and a band 8, you can notice that use a wide range of structures and stuff like that. But now what are these wide range of structures? What do you mean by it? And what do you mean by the grammatical range? So basically, grammatical range and accuracy are two different terms. I would love to focus on the grammatical range first. Grammatical range is when you use a wide variety of statements. Now, what happens in our essays, sometimes our essays become very monotonous. If you go through your essays, the flow is correct, the content is proper, you've used few words here and there. But when you go for the essay, it's very monotonous. All the sentences are seeming the same. And that's when you actually mess up your essay. So all these sentences should be different. All these sentences should not be exactly the way they are. So when I mean a wide range of sentence, I mean you use simple statements, you use complex statements, you use compound statements, you use the passive statements. Avoid things that are very informal though when you're making a use of variety of structures. Make sure that your essay is also when a lot of people when they're using or when they're elaborating on the grammar range. So what happens is they tend to mess up with the errors. They tend to make a lot of errors. So do not make a lot of errors. So let's see, like grammar is one of the major reasons why students are stuck up at 6. So let's see why are they stuck up at 6. The first thing is make errors in grammar and punctuation. So I simply make sure that all your punctuations are correct. The period is there where it is supposed to be. The comma is there when you're actually writing one dependent clause and one independent clause. So that's where you actually use a comma. An exclamation mark generally will not be there in the essay, but if it's a quote, or it's a proverb or something, please make sure even that is there. Avoid use of interrogative statements in your essays, but if in case you're using one, please ensure that there is a question mark at the end of it. So a lot of people have this habit of forgetting the full stops. So when you proofread your essay, when you check your essay before you submit it, please ensure that the full stops, the period is there where it is required to be, right? If you go to the band 7 one, uses a wide variety of complex structures. I will be explaining you what simple sentences are, what compound sentences are, and what complex sentences are in the next slide. So this grammatical range is covered. Meanwhile, I want to go for accuracy. Accuracy simply means that you're making small errors. Now, what are these errors? What are these errors like? There are a few errors that I come across on very regular basis. The first error that I come across is, as usual, the punctuation. There are no commas and no full stops. It's just going on and on and on and on. So don't do that. The second very frequent error that I see is capital letters. The capital letter has to come after the period. After the period, the sentence begins with a capital letter. And also, there is no capital letter post a comma unless and until it is a proper noun. All the proper nouns have to be mentioned in your capital letters. Names of countries, names of places, names of people, names of subject, names of colleges. So please ensure the capital letters are in the correct place and everything is not in caps or any random word is not in your caps. The third thing that I come across is the subject verb agreement. Again, a very minor topic, but most of us, most of us even know the theory of this thing, but while writing we make a lot of errors. Like for example, Ram runs, Ram and Shyam run, we talk, I talk, he talks. So please be very careful with your S. Again, another error which is very frequent is the noun pronoun agreement. Ram is a boy, he sings well. Ram is a boy, we don't sing well, right? So please be very careful. It sounds very silly, when I actually teach such things for students preparing for IELTS. But these are the errors that are spotted, because when we write, we're generally very carefree. So please be very conscious while writing it. Please make sure that when you're writing, you're in the correct state of mind, you're focused, and you ensure that there are no grammatical errors. Also, there are a lot of errors in singular and plural forms. Don't create that. Like, there is information, it is never informations. So there is technology, there can be technologies. So please be very, very careful about that. Another one is the articles. They're very precise about articles as such, like a, and the other three main articles. A is used in terms of a singular countable noun, and is used for your vowels like a, e, I, o, u. The is used for plural, singular, countable, uncountable, both, all kinds of nouns. Be careful of using them. A lot of people actually, when we write, we're not used to writing down the articles, so we actually avoid them. So when you're checking, please ensure that, okay, whenever an article is needed, please add them, and do not, whenever it's not added, please reduce them, please cancel them. So you have to write an essay with a pencil because of that. It's easier for you to check, it's easier for you to rectify your own errors. And errors for these grammar, small grammar mistakes that you'll make, to ensure that those are eliminated. I think when it comes to grammatical range and accuracy, if your basic of grammar is good, if your grammar basics are really good, when you've done your schooling, you've been very good as a student in school, at that point of time, grammatical accuracy is something that can be avoided there and there itself. So please ensure that you're very good with this part. Okay, moving on to the grammatical range now, let me explain you three main types of sentences: simple, compound, and complex. If you go to see the band 7, the first line itself states make use of complex structure. And there are a lot of people, who would be telling you use the complex structure, use the complex structure. So let's actually go, like, what is the complex structure? Okay, now as I mentioned above, there are three types of statements. The first one is a simple statement. The second one is a compound sentence. The third one is a complex statement. Let's go to the simple statement first. I passed the exam. The simple statement just has one idea, one independent clause, one subject, one verb, and one object. This is a table. That is a simple statement. I passed the exam. I is the subject, verb is past, object is your exams. There is just one idea which is mentioned in it, and it's an independent clause. Okay, now what happens is when we write the essay, to avoid errors, we write majority of our grammar in simple statements. So make sure you're not using too many simple statements. If you're using too many simple statements, ensure that you're actually changing it into compound and the complex form, so that you have your grammatical range in place, you have your wide variety of the complex structure. Uh, Moving on to the compound statement. What does compound generally mean? Forget grammar. What does compound mean? Compound basically means your addition of two things. So this way, when you're adding two simple statements with the help of coordinator, like an and, but, though, so, because, that becomes a compound statement in between. Like, for example, we have two simple statements here. I passed the exam. I got a good grade. Both of these are independent clauses. Now, when I join this statement with the help of and, I passed the exam and I got a good grade. This becomes your compound statement. This can also be a negative one. Like, for example, if there is one independent statement that says, I passed the exam, and the second independent clause which says, I did not get a good grade, you can also merge it with, I passed the exam, but I did not get a good grade. This is also the way a compound sentence is done. So when you're paraphrasing it, you can definitely use your compound statements. And when you're presenting your main idea and you're elaborating the main idea, sometimes there are too many simple statements, or you want to make the statement a little bit longer. So that time you can go for your compound statements by adding coordinators. To make a compound sentence out of a simple statement is very, very easy technically, because you're just adding a coordinator and there are less chances of grammatical errors here. Right. Moving on to the complex statement. Now, the complex statement you have to have two or more independent clauses becomes a complex statement, and you start it with the linking word, like for example, even though, despite of, although, nevertheless. Like for example, here we have, even though I wasn't happy with the grade, even though I passed the exam, or even though I passed the exam, I wasn't happy with the grade. Okay, now if you go to see, there is a comma in between. So we have, I'll tell you when is a comma put, since we have an example here. Even though I passed the exam is an incomplete statement. Okay. I wasn't happy with the grade is a complete statement. Now, whenever there is one incomplete statement, that is one dependent clause. I would like to call the incomplete statement a dependent clause, and an independent clause. Like for example, this is complete by itself, right? I wasn't happy with the grade is a complete statement by itself. So whenever you're joining one incomplete statement and one complete statement, please make sure there is a comma in between. So when you're reading out your long statements, when you're reading out your essay, when you're checking your essay, please check whether there is a statement which has something which is incomplete and something which is complete. So make sure there is a comma in between. The semicolon, on the other hand, is added when there are two complete statements. The semicolon is added when there are two complete statements. The comma is added when there is one incomplete statement and one complete statement. So this is the basic difference between comma and a semicolon. Okay, moving ahead, I'll just give you the basic strategies, the overview of it. So we're done with basically four writing band descriptors, that is task achievement, task response, cohesion and coherence, lexical resource, and grammatical range and accuracy. Again, each of these holds an equal weightage. Focus on all four of them. However correct your grammar is, if your task is not addressed properly, it's not going to make sense. If it's not synchronized properly, however correct you are, however correct your idea is, if it's not organized properly, if the layout is not appropriate, again you lose out on your bands. So I have had a couple of students who scored a 7.5, 8, 8.5 recently in writing. And while talking to them, like I was asking them what did they do to get such good scores. And that's when I actually got a lot of answers that whenever we would sit to write the essay, we would keep the band descriptors in hand. And when we created the layout, we would think that, okay, if I want to respond to this task sufficiently, what am I supposed to do? If I want to create a wide range of vocabulary, if I want to add on to the lexical resource, I want to add on to the Lexis, what am I supposed to do? So please, please, please make major use of your writing band descriptors. Keep the table on hand while you're writing. Keep the table on hand while you're even developing the idea in your head. We'll go to a few basic strategies which you can follow and few things that you should do, should not do when you write your essay. First strategy, use the question to help you organize the answer. Now this strategy is very, very important for task response. I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation that it is very, very, very important to actually answer what is asked. So when you're actually using the question, when you're interpreting the question, when you're dividing the question, and that time you're actually understanding, okay, there's a double question. I need to answer this first. I need to answer this later. Or maybe if I'm agreeing to it, I need to justify it properly. I need to elaborate the justification properly. So that is, wow, that is how it's supposed to be done. Okay. Check the general topic of the question, usually a problem, point of view, statement, or two opposing views. So, okay, sometimes what happens is a lot of my students, they fail to actually understand the question. Like they mistake the general statement for the question. So please, there's this trick that I give them. So there's this rule, there are these 4 steps that you follow when you write an essay. The first very important step is you read the question 3 times. Trust me, it really works. So when you're reading the question 3 times, subconsciously, your mind actually develops an idea of it. The second thing, you divide it. Sometimes the questions are IELTS are too long, and you don't even realize what are you supposed to do in there. So I suggest students, please, please, please divide the question. So you divide the general statement, you divide the main idea, you divide the claim, and you divide what you're supposed to do out of it. So when you have 4 parts, you know what you're supposed to address. The third thing, you create a layout. So when you're creating the layout, you're ensuring your task response and you're creating your cohesion. And at the same time, it helps in lexical resource, because somewhere down the line the idea clicks, okay, in the second paragraph I can use this vocab, in the third paragraph I can use this vocab, right? The fourth is actually you write your whole essay. Like, you make sure that you write it in at least 250 words. Don't stretch it a lot. Again, I'm repeating this. When you stretch it a lot, you go out of focus, you lack in cohesion, your essay is not synchronized properly, and then there are a lot of grammatical errors. So keep it as to the point, as point specific as possible. And the fifth thing is, please check your essay. Checking the essay, has this particular point has been undervalued for a lot of time, and generally it's the laziest part. You're finally done with the last thing of IELTS, and you don't want to just look at it ever again. So please don't do that. Please check it. Do not be lazy, because there are few errors on the front level. You would be able to find it, and these errors, you'll be penalized for it. So make sure you're not doing it. Right. Also, there are a few things that I would want you to keep in mind when you write an essay. The first thing that you keep in mind is, please don't be redundant. That is repetitive. Now, here it means both the things. I would definitely mean repetition of words. I would also mean repetition of ideas. Repetition of ideas should not be there. A lot of people, we used to writing lengthy answers in our university exams. We keep on writing them. Please make it point specific. When you're justifying something, when you're giving a reason, 2 to 3 statements of justification is more than enough. Do whatever is required. Do not over explain it. Do not under explain it. It should be clear enough to the examiner. So please do not repeat your ideas. The second thing is, there are certain words that account for redundancy. Like, for example, revert back. You revert means you reply back. So, there's no need of back. Please check and evaluate it. So, you don't check and you evaluate it. Checking means evaluation. So either if you used one word, it's more than enough, because then what happens is, it seems that, you're increasing the word count, and sometimes it also means that you did not know the meaning of the statement, meaning of the word, which may or may not be the case. So again, when you're using such words, make sure that you know the meaning of the words before writing. Do not muck up your essays. Do not make it mechanical. Do not give the template form. We're all very very tempted. Me as a trainer also, I want to make it easy for my students, and I generally provide a template to them. But it's a very, very wrong idea to do so, following a specific template, because it restricts you, it bounds you to a specific thing. Because then ultimately you want to go for that. Sometimes the question may vary, sometimes the situation may vary, and you may or may not be able to use the template. Also, it shows that you mucked up, and the examiners can actually make it out since when is the learned thing, and since when is your original content. So again, that doesn't count. Again, don't make your essay too long. Make it point specific, address it fully, write it how exactly it's supposed to be done. Another, please make your essay extremely legible. Each word should be clearly visible to the examiner. Spare the examiner. Do not torture them with your handwriting. Make it as clear. Present your idea. Show a lot of clarity in your ideas. Show a lot of clarity in terms of your proposition, in your justification, in your reasoning skills. So that is what is meant. That is what is important. Also, I missed out on one point. When you give an example, the example can be hypothetical, or the example can be a real example. So when you're giving a real example, please ensure do not tamper with the universal facts. When you're giving a real example, do not focus, focus more that the information that you have is correct. Like, the sun has to rise from the east. The sun cannot rise in the west, because you just need to quote an example, right? So do not tamper with the universal facts when you give an example. Again, time management is something that you should be very, very careful of, because you have 60 minutes to actually answer your writing component, out of which 20 is allocated to task 1, 40 is allocated to task 2. Generally, it is more than sufficient time to address this part, but still, like, for example, if you're giving 10 minutes to just planning of your essay, writing the essay in 20 minutes, and then you have 10 minutes to check your essay. So please ensure that you're dividing on times, and as and when you practice, please keep a stopwatch, because it will help you eventually in the exam. So, I always tell my students that there should be nothing in IELTS that should be done without a stopwatch. It is the most important prop which is required for IELTS. I'm actually done with my writing component theoretical part. I'm sure you might have a lot of questions, so let me answer them for you. Please post your queries. I hope this entire webinar was useful for you, and there are certain specifications that you've got. There are certain things, there's certain clarity that you've got in terms of band descriptors. And for online coaching, please register on to ieltstutorials.online. You can enroll there for online practice. I would like you to raise your queries now. I would be solving them. Okay, I can't see anything other than the first slide. Okay, I think we sorted that technical error there. So, is there any online coaching? I mean, is there any questions which you got? Okay, I'll answer a few FAQs that I have in mind. A lot of students they come across. So the first FAQ is like, can you use contractions? Avoid contractions. Absolutely avoid contractions. There should be no short forms, no IE, no V's, no dot dot dot. Write it completely. It's therefore, write it therefore. Also, when you're writing your essay, avoid extreme statements. You know, the people who go extreme for anything. Keep the tone of your essay very, very neutral. You know, when you're actually writing an essay, make sure you're not hurting any religious sentiment, hurting, not even, you know, it's not only about religious sentiment, but it's about sentiments of anybody. Like, for example, there may be, you know, you're just offending a particular gender, you're offending a particular country. Don't do that. It's not correct. Any questions? Okay, the essay is usually of how many words? The essay is usually of 250 words. That is the minimum word count, as I had mentioned. You can go above limit. Above, there is no upper limit for it. But again, maintain brevity. Again, answer what is asked. Do not go too long. You will definitely, you know, make a lot of errors. There is a lack of cohesion in this case. Task response may not be appropriate, you know, if you're going too long. There is somebody who's asked me which books, materials, or websites can be used for improving grammar. There are plenty of books and materials and websites which are useful for available for grammar. One thing I would like you to suggest when you're actually Googling this, a lot of people have this habit, they take up a topic in Google. Please refer the authentic sources. What I usually use for myself is I use Brennan Martin, which is a very old school book, but I've been going through it since a couple of years and it has really helped me. However, that is grammar much in detail. There are a lot of books for specific IELTS related grammar books available in the market, which you can go through. Again, referring the website for any lexical resource, for any grammar, even for any FAQs, please ensure those are authentic, because the material online may or may not be authentic and you may fall prey to, you know, false things. Like I have seen a lot of essays in grammar where they've said that this student particularly has scored a 7 band, and which would never be the possibility. So I have come across a couple of dupes in that case, so avoid it. Definitely. Anything else? Okay, there is one thing, again, one more error or one more question that comes across to me very frequently is, can we copy the question in task 1 or in task 2? Do not copy the question. Paraphrasing or writing the question in your own words plays a very important role when it comes to the IELTS essay. So please do not do that. Please ensure that, you know, you're rephrasing it again with the use of simple statements, with the use of compound statements, with the use of complex statements, passive voice. So rephrase it. Yes. I have this question again. Some questions are difficult to answer as you do not know or have any idea about the topic, what to do in such situations. Okay. As in, the topics are always general based. There would be no topic which are general knowledge based. See, IELTS is basically a language proficiency exam. The exam is just to judge your basic knowledge of language. Like it's, and especially the writing component is whether you know writing, whether you can write, and whether you can write, you know, taking in consideration all the 4 elements. So there would never be a topic which which would be general knowledge based. Like it would be something that is happening and something that is well aware. Like most of the topics revolve around pollution, they revolve on society, they revolve on teenagers, they revolve on studies, they revolve on hobbies. So it's very easy to answer such questions. You will absolutely never have a problem with this. Like they're not going to ask you an essay on the latest space expedition or point specific, giving, asking you to give the details of it. Right. Would you recommend the IELTS book by the Cambridge University? Yes, I would. It's a good book for practice. In fact, all the books, like, for example, Cambridge 11, 12, 13, they're amazing when it comes to practice. And yes, I would definitely recommend you to practice the books that have been given to you. When you register for your test, the book would be sent to you by courier or post. I would recommend you to go through the book at least once, at least solve the practices. They're really, really helpful. At least they're better than, sometimes online tests which are there. Sometimes they're reliable, sometimes they're not reliable. Sometimes they're too difficult, sometimes they're too easy, and you don't know the level of it. And then sometimes you're underconfident and then overconfident. So avoid all that. Go by the official books. They're much more better. Anything else? Which other books to refer apart from Cambridge books? Okay, again, a very important, frequently asked question. There are a lot of Cambridge books, and the Cambridge books are absolutely lovely. Other books, you can go for, again, you go to the market and there are amazing books. There are amazing publishers. There's Oxford who's come out, there's Test Builder. I would suggest go with the Cambridge books. Also, there's one very important part of IELTS, a very undervalued part. You all focus on finishing the books. Like, I want to finish this book, I want to finish 5 tests, I want to finish 10 tests. We focus a lot on quality, quantity, I would say. But you know what you need to focus on is on the quality. If you know how to do it, let's say you know one listening, you've nailed it, you know exactly the tips, you know exactly the technique. So when you're doing the other one, it's naturally going to be easier for you. In fact, it's going to be better for you. There's no point of doing 10 without understanding the logic of it. And I suggest do one, but do it perfectly. You should be nailing it absolutely. So I think do not over do IELTS practice. I have a lot of people, again. We finished 10 books, we finished 12 books, but we did not get a score. What happened? And I tell them that it's never about the quantity, it's about the quality. And when you overdo something, when you overdo IELTS, it's a language exam. So when you're overdoing it, ultimately you're stressing yourself out. And when you stress yourself out and when you go for the examination, again, it's going to hamper your scores. So please don't over practice. Practice as much as needed. What I suggest, how to practice for the IELTS exam, I would tell you what I do. First thing, understand the tips, understand the techniques, understand the question types. The second thing is go for a practice. When you practice, understand why the things are wrong and then answer the correct ones. Like, let's say there can be correct answers with flukes and there can be wrong answers. And when you study the wrong answers, let's say you've written it true and the answer is false. So next time you avoid that error. What score, as per your view, will be acing it? There is unclarity in the question. Exactly such kind of idea should not be presented. You can ace it with a 7, you can ace it with an 8 if you're actually going through the band descriptors. Trust me, the only way, everybody, when you start writing an essay, okay, what happens is you know what the topic is about. You know the format of it. You've learned all the words. You've done the vocabulary. What is missing? You don't realize what the examiners expect out of you. If you know what is expected out of you, you're definitely going to work on delivering it. And when you work on delivering it, there is absolutely no chance that you cannot get your score. 150% you will get your score if you do your band descriptors well, if you deliver what is asked, if you answer what is asked. I mean, they're there to give you the scores. Any other question? You can contact our online tutorials in case of any other queries that you have regarding this session too. Okay, one last thing before I sign off for this session is when you write an essay, this is what practically happens. I'm giving you a very practical exposure to this one. See, when you go for your IELTS test, your first module is going to be listening, okay? The second module is going to be reading. The third module is going to be writing. So when you come to your writing component, you're extremely exhausted mentally because you've done with reading bits, that is a little bit heavy on the head. So when you go for your writing bit, sometimes what happens is we feel the question is very easy. We feel that okay, I'll be able to answer this. The first step that I told you, read the question thrice, is important because at the same time you're understanding that you're not missing out on any section of the question. You're not missing out on minor details which have been asked in the question. And before you start your writing component, I would suggest you take a break for 30 seconds or 1 minute. Just close your eyes and relax and then start writing afresh. Because somewhere down the line, when your mind gets exhausted, you're not going to deliver good results. And then follow those steps. Like you read, you divide, you present you go for your layout, you write and you check. Then when you write an essay, I think definitely it's going to be good. Please answer what is asked. Please do not revolve. Please don't go out of focus. So that is again a major thing. Like if you're out of focus, if you're not answering about the topic, what is the point of good vocab? What is the point of good grammar? What is the point of proper logical and proper linking words? There's no point. If I'm asking you about pollution, you can't give me answers about population, right? So please be very careful about it. Um, can I know your name in case I want to get in touch with you? You can. I work with the Aussies group, and my name is Vidisha Vitlani, and you can get in touch with the Aussies group in case of any queries. In this case, okay. Thank you so much. I hope this session was useful to you. I hope you learned something that helps you get a better score. All the best for your writing component. All the best. And again, I would say that we have we have more webinars coming up. On the 29th, it's on the letter writing for the general. On the 6th, it's for the graph for the academic. And back then, with the band descriptors and the format and everything about the writing task one would be explained to you much more in detail. Thank you.